Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Are you passionate about creating amazing podcasts? Terrific. You are in the right place. Welcome to Pod Talk, short conversations with podcast creators that are not just about podcasting, because I like to take the scenic route. My guest today is Robin Waite. Welcome, Robin. How are you this afternoon?
I'm great, thank you, Craig. I'm really excited about our conversation.
I find the more that I do pre-calls, I don't always do pre-calls, but when I don't know people super well, the more that I do pre-calls, the better the podcasts get because the pre-call went great. You and I were like 3 minutes in, and I'm like, yeah, this is all right. Now we're just talking for fun because this is going to be great. And it also gives us both a chance to think back to that little conversation we had. I want to start out by saying, so Robin, you have a great little show. I was just listening to your most recent episode called The Fearless Business Podcast. A neat little combination. I'm always impressed when I see people do lots of good host on mic episodes as well as guests, because I'm always scared to death of host on mic. So the first thing I want to say is 175 episodes when I look today. Mad props. Podcasting is hard. I know you're doing it all yourself. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And today I kind of want to challenge our listeners to maybe think outside I don't want to say little box. I don't mean it to be diminutive, but think outside that box that the listener that you have for what you are doing. So you're imagining, I make my podcast, I ship the thing, I make it fit in my life. And I'm trying to do something specific for my listeners, or maybe I'm trying to do something for my business. Most of the podcasters I know are really just in it because it's a passion. And I wanted to ask you about your ideas around basically getting whatever I want, like each of us getting what we want. And I really liked the way you discussed how you got on a particular, you like went all in on guesting for a while. So
Yeah.
I'll leave it up to you if you want to tell the story of the show that you got on and how you did it, or if you want to dive into like nuts and boltsy how you did it. I'll leave that up to you.
Oh, we can do both actually. I try and break the steps down, but there's a bit of a backstory behind it. So late 2022, I got a bit bored of just doing the same old marketing stuff over and over again that all the experts and gurus sort of tell you to do. So recording short and long form pieces of content, writing blog articles, guesting on podcasts, start your own podcast, write a book, long social media posting like a gazillion times a day. And I was just like probably spending at one point 25, 30 plus hours a week alone on
Ouch.
social media and marketing for my small little coaching practice. And I was just getting to a point of burnout. It seemed like there was a lot of effort and input, and the results didn't really. I was getting some results, but it didn't feel tantamount to the amount of effort I was putting into it. So in late 2022, I became antisocial, Craig, and decided enough was enough.
You and me both.
But I woke up on 1st of January 2023 thinking, oh, WTF am I going to do? Because now I'm not doing all of that other stuff. I need to market my business still. I still need clients. So I look back at my sort of at that point 5-6 year coaching career and all of the other stuff I'd done in business before that, and hit upon this idea that really marketing should be fun. It shouldn't feel like a grind. And I was thinking about some of the most fun interactions that I'd had, with all the amazing people like yourself that I get to meet doing things like this, and the events I'd attended, the content I consumed in terms of books and podcasts and YouTube videos and things. And then I was like, there's some really cool people out there that I would just love to get involved more with what they're getting up to, instead of it being inside out, me trying to project all of myself as an expert. I thought, well, that's not really working. Why don't I take more of an outside in approach and just go and see if I could partner up with these people? Because there's some incredible people, whether it's by luck or judgment, they've created these awesome audiences. They've got a wonderful vibe about them. They're just great fun to hang out with. So start of 2023, I just wrote down a list of 10 brands or people that I was like, I just want to hang out with these people. They're fun. I vibe with their message. We have a crossover in terms of our audiences. We talk about similar sorts of things, and what they're getting up to just seems really cool. So I wrote down, and by the way, some of these names that I kind of mention as we go through this, some people may or may not know who they are, but they're worth checking out if if you don't know them. But on that list was Chris Do, runs a channel called The Future. He works a lot with creatives, guy based over in LA. He's got 2.5 million YouTube subscribers. There's Daniel Priestley, who's a fantastic author. He's just been on DOA, Diary of a CEO, 3 times, I think now. There's a guy called Ali Abdaal, who's this wonderful like productivity influencer. He's got 6 million subscribers on YouTube. So I just wrote down this list of 10 people. I thought it would just be great fun to hang out with these people. And when I say, so that's kind of the first step which I took. The second step was, and I paint a picture here. So I have this lovely little studio outside my house. And I live in the middle of an area of England called the Cotswolds. So it's like rolling countryside hills, as far away from the big cities as you get.
I've been there.
You have, I remember. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
But it's as far away from entrepreneurship and business as you can possibly get.
Right.
So I was like, how am I going to meet these people? Like, because the thing I realized was that the internet's done this wonderful thing that it's enabled us to be able to connect with people like globally and do great stuff like, these podcast interviews, chat to people on Zoom and whatnot. But you cannot beat sitting in a room with somebody or shaking their hand, taking a selfie with them and those sorts of things. So I was like, right, I need to make sure that, and this is kind of the second step in the process, make sure that I'm in the same room as these people. So I started to look at what events they were running, if they were doing masterclasses or in-person events or webinars. How are they showing up online? And is there a way that I could support them? And not only that, but this is the biggest mistake I see a lot of people make, especially creators, because a lot of creators are actually naturally introverted. So they'll show up to the events and they'll sit in the back row, which is great. They learn something, but they never put themselves out there on a bit of a pedestal or create opportunities to meet these amazing people. And it's in meeting these people where these opportunities, that's where the magic happens. So aside from being in the same room, put yourself in the front row. So the moment the person finishes their talk or whatever, you can jump up, shake the hand, tell them what an amazing job they did in their talk, how much you love their content, take a selfie, hand them a copy of your book or whatever, some kind of marketing asset. If you've got something, a gift to give them, it just makes you memorable. You stick around in their sort of psyche, in their memory. And I just loved these conversations that were starting to happen. And I remember there was one particular event, and this just kind of leads me on to the third steps. And by the way, you have to imagine this is like a 6-month period in 2023 where I'm kind of just figuring this out, making it up as I go along.
Right.
But I had a slight clue, a guy called Simon Alexander-Ong, who's also got a wonderful YouTube channel. And he kept on having photos of himself with like Simon Sinek and Steve Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, and all these massively influential people. I was like, Simon, how do you do this? And he's like, well, Robin, it's really simple. I was like, on the edge of my seat, like, tell me, Simon, feed me. And he went,
go there.
He got really critical on me, and he just said, well, just watch what I do. I was like, no, Simon, I need the steps. So I had to work. These are all the steps that I worked out in my head. But I started watching Simon. I saw that he picked specific people he wanted to hang up with. He was intentional. I saw that he was going to these events, getting in the same room and having photos with people. And then I noticed that one of the things he was doing was he was really helpful, just showed up, added value. He was a very generous guy, very abundant. So he never expected anything in return, and we've become very good friends over the last few years. So it's like, right, step number 3 then has to be, and I'm trying to figure this out as I go, has to be show up and add value. So I went to one of Ali Abdaal's events. This is the story which I shared with you when we did the interview. I go to this event, there's 600 people there, and they all look lost. It was in a university and it was not signed or anything like that. So took my coat off, put my bag on the floor, and I thought, right, I'm just going to start directing people. I was like, the cafeteria's over there, the loos are over there, the auditorium's that way. Ali's going to be signing books over there afterwards, so make sure you get a copy of the book and get him to sign it. And Ali's MD, managing director, comes over, or general manager comes over, and a guy called Angus, and he's like, Rob, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm just helping people. They all looked a bit lost. Hope you don't mind. He went, well, Rob, you're a guest. You don't need to be doing this. Like, we don't need to come and enjoy.
Yeah. Where's the venue director who's supposed to be doing that, right?
I said, it's fine, Angus. Don't mind doing this at all. And he went to turn away, took 3 steps, and then he came back. And he's like, Rob, whilst I've got you, Ali's doing this new product, new launch. We're not sure about the pricing side of things. So for a bit of context for those listening, so I'm as you know, I'm a coach. I help people, small business owners, sort of get out of hourly rate and package up their offer and start charging more for it. So Ali's MD, Angus, said, we've got a pricing query. It'd be great if you've got 5 minutes at the end of this for us to, you, me and Ali to get together. And I was like, let me think about that for a second. Heck yes.
Yeah, right. Expletive, yes.
Of course, we have the conversation and I helped them out. I added lots of value to their brand. I ended up getting on a Zoom call with them the following week. We went far deeper into like how he's going to package it and position the offer and various things like that. And I just started to just help coach his team. So at this point, Ali's growing a team. And I just said, look, I'll coach your team. I love hanging out with you guys. They're great fun. They're all freelancers, my ideal client. Let me just coach some of them because it'll help you and your business and it'll help them. And then and this is kind of like, these are things that a lot of people would there'd be a bit of fear around it. They would think, I'm natural things. Oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Who am I to go and help somebody like Ali Abdaal? Because he's really smart. Why should he let me help? Just really natural, normal sort of fears. And I don't know why, but probably something exploded in my head when I was, in 2022, the whole social media thing. And I just went, F it. I'm done with like just trying to be normal and do it the way everybody else does it. I'll just do it my way. Right. And like, what's the worst that can happen? You trip up, you fall over, maybe you look a bit stupid, but by tomorrow, everybody's forgotten about it. Right. So at the end of one of the conversations, a guy called Joe, who was on Ali's team, he stopped me at the end of the conversation. He's like, that was so valuable, Robin. I can see like how this is going to help me and Ali, and like, I have to pay you. And I was like, I don't want any money. It's not part of the agreement. Like, I just wanted to help you, Ali's team out. No, I have to do something. What do you want? And I said, well, again, there's this one thing, right? I know Ali's recording his podcast in a couple of weeks and he's got 2 seasons back to back before he travels. So don't put me up for the podcast because I know he's filled all those slots already. So I had my inside man. This is step 4. I'd got to know, what was going on in the organization. So I was able to be really hyper specific about what I was asking for. I know you want to dive into this topic as well. So I said, put me on the subs bench. There's 24 people flying in from all over the world over the next 3 weeks. If one of them can't make it, just call me. I'll get on a train and I'll come down and record. And thought nothing of it. And he said, yeah, no problem. It transpires Joe was dating Ali's podcast booker. Right. So They obviously discussed the session that evening and then they got talking. And 48 hours later, I get the call. It's a Thursday night or something. Rob, we've got one of our guests has pulled out on Tuesday. Can you make it? I was like, yeah, no problem. Absolutely. Got off the phone and I was like, oh, crap. Because I had like school drop off and pick up that day. I had a coaching client, 2 podcast interviews. My wife was away with work. Right.
Now I have to go figure out how to do this. But
yeah, all of these things that needed to be resolved. Anyway, so I went down and recorded. A little side note to this story. I was coming out of Paddington Station in London. And there's lots of pigeons there. It's well renowned for its pigeon colony that lives at Paddington and around there, like rats with wings. Anyway, I walk out of Paddington and a pigeon literally poops on my head, like all down my head, my Fearless t-shirt, like everything. Normally, right, you'd be like, oh God, what do I do? Oh, all this sort of stuff. I started laughing really loud. People must have thought I was crazy. I don't know why, but normally when I go to London, I don't pack spare clothes unless I'm staying overnight. But I thought this is a big deal, guesting on this, Ali Abdaal's Deep Dive podcast, 6 million subscribers. So I actually packed 5 spare t-shirts that day, different colors.
Just in case they didn't like the color, right?
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. You never know. So anyway, I get changed quickly in Hilton, hotel next door, go to do the podcast. It's 2.5 hours. Think nothing of it. Anyway, when it launched 2 months later, so that was sort of June, and then August it went live. And I'll be really honest, I'd had a bit of a slow period in my coaching practice as I'd stopped doing one thing, wound down all of the normal marketing. I think I only enrolled 3 clients during that 8 months up to the August in 2023. So I was starting to get a little bit worried, but I've got other income streams and businesses. Yeah. Anyway, the podcast drops August the 4th, I think it was 23. And, literally my inbox blew up. And I think this is there's a whole other backstory to that, but that one podcast, in short, generated 3,000 inquiries for my humble little coaching practice, and probably somewhere in the order of about $300,000 worth of new business since it's gone live, in the last sort of 12 to 18 months. And I think there's a number of places where, like, have you ever seen the film Sliding Doors?
Yes.
Right.
One little shift.
That's it. If I look at this, if I hadn't have gone to that event, if I hadn't have just dumped my coat and helped direct people, if I hadn't offered to help for free, if I hadn't got to know the team, if I'd asked for the wrong thing or too much or I don't know, if I'd got the ask wrong, any one of those things could have ended up being like a sliding doors moment where I go from 3,000 leads to just going about my life as a coach, doing what I was doing previously. The good news is, since then, I've got on other massive podcasts just like that. I've managed to book my dream speaking engagement this year in front of 1,500 people, which I'm so stoked about. I've had photos taken with, again, I mentioned him before, but Steve Bartlett from Diary of a CEO, and he's one of on my intentional list of people I want to guest on. There's just all of these things have started to happen because I've just been consistently just going through the gears, the motions, and
like once
people.
You see the process work once, I mean, it made sense. Initially it's like, oh, it looks like I could do this, then I do this, then I do that, then I do that. And you're like, that looks like it makes sense. Then you do it and it works. You're like, oh, whoa, I could do that again. When I heard you tell me that story the first time, the part where, and you mentioned it as you were telling it, the part where you had the right sized ask, I was like, oh yes, that's the thing that I don't pre-visualize that. Like, and that's an error that I make. So I've gone to conferences, or I do a lot of stuff in the movement context, coaching and moving and playing, blah, blah, blah. I've gone to events and I've been there with like, here's why I'm here. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm offering. Here's, I'm trying to be helpful. But I've never had an ask in mind. I've never thought like, well, if the event coordinator said to me, hey, what could you, I don't actually, I feel that hadn't occurred to me to think that far ahead.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really key insight. And when I started out by saying to the people listening, like, I want to challenge you to think outside your box, is I want to challenge you to like, what would be an ask that someone could imagine? Because your ask was not, I wish I could have 3,000 coaching inquiries. That was not what you were imagining in your head. What you were imagining was like, well, how cool would it be to be on the show? And like the right size ask was, look, I don't expect you to put me on the show, but like, I'm your Huckleberry as an American, I'll be there. If you need a pinch hitter, I'm ready to run out of the dugout. So I think there's really useful insight there. Have you found, like, when you're coaching people, do you find yourself coaching this? I hate to call it a process because it trivializes it, but do you coach this process, or is it really that one piece of it that you find your coaching clients get the most bang out of? Like, what, how does that? So now you had that experience and you've verified that it works multiple times. How does that color your coaching that you're doing?
Yeah, so I do teach it, and you have to see like this partnership model. I mean, you think about my journey from 1st of January to August when it went live, right? It's a long-term play. This isn't. It's like Simon Sinek when he talks about the infinite game. This is like there's no plan B. We're going to make this work regardless. So I'm going to play the long game. And some of the partnerships I've been nurturing for 2-3+ years now, they still haven't necessarily come to fruition, but I can feel that there is momentum there. But I know that if each one of those 10 that comes to fruition generates another 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 leads, then it works. But there's some challenges. So the first one is most small business owners, for example, one, they don't feel they deserve a seat at the table. They don't feel that they can sort of jump that rung up the social ladder to build partnerships with some of these people, because in their eyes, they're looking at their hero thinking, well, who am I to sit at the same table as these people?
The hero is the exact same person as you. They're looking around like, boy, I wish someone would give me a leg up. I wish I could get some help.
But it's weird though, because maybe it's because I've picked similar people to me. But as I've got to know these people on my list on a more personal level, you see they have insecurities. Maybe they're a bit introverted, or they struggle to have like conversations. Maybe they're worried about what people. They're no different to like you or I. They have exactly the same. They're the same as us. They're just human beings. So you have to first of all have that belief that you deserve to have that seat at the table. That's the first thing. The second thing is that level of intentionality and doing it without any expectation of anything in return. I love these people and their content, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be in their world. But the moment I make it about me and make it about my mortgage and putting food on the table for my kid,
transactional.
very transactional, it's gone. The woo woo energy that's built out of like genuine partnerships just goes, right. And there's probably somebody who could explain the psychology of that better than I just did, but you get the picture. So for me, I'm very much like, it's 99% about what's in it for the other person, but at the back of my mind, and going to your point here about like the ask, it's just having that layer of intentionality. Like, oh, what if somebody does come up and say, Craig, that was amazing what you've done today. If there's any way I can help you, and you just calmly just go, well, do you know what? There is this one thing, and you can say no to this, or but how about like maybe next year you consider me to be a speaker at this event, or could I compare it, or is there any way that I've got loads of stuff to say about podcasting? Could I do a workshop with your inner circle, your membership? That would be a real joy for me if you're open to it. So again, even the ask is leading with value. It's not a book me, pay me, give me money. Like,
do you have $20?
And it's there's a guy called Simon Squibb actually who is brilliant. If you catch his videos, so he has a strap line which is what's your dream. So he does street interviews with people with a microphone, shoves it in their face and says, what's your dream? And one of his recent sort of series of videos, he would wait and obviously be in a restaurant or a cafe and wait until they come to give him the bill. And he'd have a copy of his book and £1,000 in his hand. And he'd say, would you like the book as a tip, or would you like the £1,000? And it's really weird. Everybody chooses the book, right? But that's because people are naturally generous. They want to help support the other person. It's not, there are a couple of people that have chosen the money. And of course you could get the money and then go and spend $20 on the book, right?
On the book, right.
And
but when I take that money out of your hand, I know exactly what I'm taking from you. You didn't like print that money out of your printer. That actually is real money. But when I take the book, you're not making any money on it if I buy the book either. But the book is, somehow we know the book is the thing that you wanted to give away, like the concept that you put in there.
It's an energetic exchange. It's very transactional and far more genuine. And of course, what typically happens is Simon will then say, "Oh, why did you take the book and not the money? Because you could take the money and buy the book." And they're like, "Well, I can probably learn more from the book than I would do just taking $1,000. So it's more important I get the book and read it now." And he's like, "Well, have the $1,000 anyway, but tell me, what would you do with the $1,000 if you started a business?" And then he goes on to his usual sort of train of thought. So they get the money anyway, right? It's like we call it in the UK. I don't know if you have this at all, and you can cut this bit out if it's not appropriate. But we have this thing in the UK called a shit test, basically, to see what somebody's sort of, what their DNA is made of, basically, what type of a person they are. But it's so, I love the psychology around it, about that, just that giving thing. And the ask as well, there's like several components to that ask. So one is like, if you can ask by giving value and getting back what you want out of it by virtue of that, by helping more people, again, it's like very altruistic, and in a positive way, it's got this virtuous sort of cycle to it. But the timing of that ask, the size and quantity of the ask, what you actually ask for, when you do it, and like energetically how you go about making that ask, it can backfire and go wrong at any moment if you don't get those moving parts sort of all in order.
I'm thinking of, I'm reminded of, I went to, 15 years ago or so, I got really into parkour, the running and jumping and playing thing. And I've gone to the trouble of going to the place where it originally started in France and hanging out with and training with the people who started it all. And they have an event. They don't run it every year, but it's basically like 40 people who are really into the roots of this. And everybody there is French. So you have to be able to speak French because there's nothing in English. So I'm like doing my best to try and listen along. And we had one of these situations where they were having sort of a conference where regular people who do the thing wanted to hang out and talk to the founders. And one of the, the people running the thing said to me, like, they were just looking around going like, Craig's here from America and Craig does this Movers Mindset podcast. And, they said like, would you like to just have a session where you talk? And they were kind of like, where are you? And they just sort of faded out, like begging me to fill in the blank on something. And fortunately, what sprung to mind was I had ideas in my head about talking about conversation, facilitating conversations, which is really where my personal mission is.
Mm.
And I said something to that effect, and they were like, that'd be great. Because like they were looking for anything that wasn't just straight movement. It was all running and moving and talking about moving. And so I said, oh, what about this? And they were like, great. And they like went out and, they had like a whiteboard. They like, squeezed it into the schedule on the whiteboard. And I wound up in a room with about 10 people. And I got what I always wanted, which was 10 people that I had never talked to before, that I would never bump into normally, who wanted to talk about the thing I wanted to talk about. So I was just like, oh, this is terrible. I say a sentence and then I sit here for half an hour and these people talk to me about what I really wanted. And I would have never imagined that was something that was possible at that event, because imposter syndrome, these are the people who started it all. Who am I? I'm just Craig. But when they said, hey, we have some space, would you like to do something? And then I said, oh, what about this thing? And I didn't connect that when we talked at first, but now as you're describing, what is the right size ask? Do you have an ask? Do you ask it in the right way? Is it really about giving more than, and then I felt like I got a lot more out of it. But later talking to more people, they all got as much out of it too. So it was super fun. So I think I'm just trying to talk people into imagining outside the box. What's something that you would love to have? I often say, I wish more people talked to me about podcasting. So then I built a community and then I built a podcast and all I do is ask people, hey, do you want to talk? And then, I have an embarrassment of riches. That's my take on the right size asked.
Well, there's something in that, because what I heard there was that there was a little bit of tension, and imagine if you'd leaned away from that bit of tension, that little but when you got asked and the butterfly started swinging around. The nerves I'm talking about, don't you, Craig? When you're like, what do I say?
No, I'm good. I'm all good. I don't need.
Imagine like you leaned away from it, and that was your response. The doors have just now, the sliding doors moment. Dunk. You've just kind of missed the opportunity, right? But it's as quick and simple as that. It can come and go in like a heartbeat. And I think that I would encourage people, the moment you kind of feel that tension, like in your chest and the sweaty palms and the heartbeats going, that is the point when you need to be sort of leaning into that energy. Even something simple like, so another example of this, Chris Do came over to London. He's not in London very often. So I was like, right, get on the train, go down, watch his talk. And there's 150 plus people there. And Chris's whole ethos around his content is, like he gets a really cool venue. He'll sit like 150 people on whatever chairs, like cushions or whatever you can find on the floor, So really cool people in really cool venues. And then he kind of like will draw somebody out of the crowd and say, like, let's talk about your business. So, but they film the interactions. It's like, it's really incredibly like creative. But at this one at London, that's it. There was no videographer there. There was nobody with a mic or anything like that. And like, we were going to be there for 3 hours. And I knew like for Chris, that would be such an opportunity missed to get some content for his channel. So I found somebody, I didn't have my camera with me. So I found somebody with a camera, DSLR, who could film it. And they didn't have mics, but for one reason or another, I started, wherever I go now, I take some little Rode Go mics, little plug-in lav things. So we got Chris mic'd up, and then I had a roaming mic. And then I just started handing the mic around to people as Chris was kind of like doing his thing, coaching them and asking questions and stuff like that. And then again, this is like reciprocation in action. Partway through this, and this is is this the second time I'd met Chris in person? And we're like 2 hours into this workshop, and he said, whoa, let's just hold our thoughts for a second. And he said, I just want to point out and say thank you to this guy over here in the blue Fearless shirt, Robin, because I said he's been running around like a mad thing to try and get all the audio, like recording, like the mic, so and it's like, yay, well done. Then he said, by the way, like you guys should go and check out Robin's book, because he's got this amazing book, and like I've read part of it, I haven't read it all yet. And by the way, Robin, I haven't had you on the podcast yet, because this is in front of 150 people. He's doing this little monologue about me. I'm like, oh, Chris, God, being all humble and everything. And he's like, yeah, go and buy the book, listen to his podcast. Rob will get you on the podcast when I've finished reading your book. things like that. And it was so lovely to get that piece of recognition. But that was genuinely because I just wanted to be helpful and make sure he got the content. And since then, and this is like the pièce de résistance. If you get those 5 steps sort of right, I missed off step number 5, so don't let me finish without just sort of touching on that.
Call you a callback.
But Chris, I knew, so in January, I went out to Dubai, and Chris heard that I was flying out to Dubai. So he invited me and a friend to go and co-facilitate a workshop he was delivering at the 1 Billion Followers Summit. And I was like, wow, that's a real kind of accolade, recognition that I was getting. Delivered the workshop, and I thought, I have to find a way to thank Chris, because that's like, he paid for my conference ticket and various other things, a couple of meals whilst we were out there. So I was like, I've got to say thank you to the guy. So again, thinking that sort of, that reciprocal sort of reciprocation sort of thinking. And I don't know if you've been to Dubai, but like hiring a yacht out there is like hailing an Uber. It's literally like you go onto an app, put in like how many people you want to go on it, and then you
I have not been there, no.
Right. And you choose, it gives you a list of boats, you can put your budget in, and then you hire a yacht. And so that morning I hired one, and then on a whim, like I did it on a whim, thinking, well, like I've got to have the yacht before I invite people on it, right? So I booked it, and then I was going to invite. Anyway, Chris said yes. Oh my God, Chris says yes. He brought his 2 sons with him. They're grown up, they're helping him with all of his sort of tour that he was doing. And then we also had 6 other entrepreneurs who came and joined us on this boat. And we sailed for 3 hours, went around the Palm in Dubai at sunset. Glorious, lovely, like beach music sort of playing and stuff. Partway through, Chris was like, "Oh my God, Rob, I can't believe you actually just hired a yacht. This is nuts." And I was like, "Well, Chris, I know you enjoy boats, right? Because you did a fishing.
Look, it's an app, right?"
Yeah. He's like, "I think I know why you did this." And I was like, "Well, go on then." And he said, "Well, I know you're doing this because you're really grateful. Like I genuinely see that." He said, "But I can't get off a boat, can I?" And I was like, there is that." So I got to spend 3 hours
right
with this incredibly smart guy, and just kind of lean into that sort of partnership, And I didn't drag him onto the boat cooking and kicking and screaming. He came of his own accord.
Tranquilized them and drug them aboard.
It's been weird. Don't do that. Yeah. That's not step 5.
That would be weird. Anyway. Yes, also illegal, immoral, inappropriate.
But I shared this with a friend of mine afterwards, a mutual friend, Dan Priestley, who's a great author and knows Chris well. And Dan was like, "That was genius." He's Australian, so I do a really rubbish Australian accent. "That was genius, mate. That was so smart." He said, "That's like the best way to build relationships with people." You can tell I can't do accents very well. Anyway, so I was like, "Oh, why is that?" He said, "Well, Chris will never forget that." And he said, "Imagine if you'd actually had to pay for 3 hours of Chris's time. It would have probably cost you like $18,000 because
and he wouldn't remember, right?
And he wouldn't remember it because I'm just another client, right?" So he's like, and I said, "Why do you? You're really adamant about that. What evidence do you have?" And he said, "Well, I did something similar. I went out again in Dubai." He said, "A few years back, I got invited onto this mega yacht with one of the biggest investors in Dubai, and I wanted to say thank you because it was an amazing experience." And he said, "So what I did when the boat pulled in and like these 40 other entrepreneurs all disembark, and then Dan went and filled up the tank of fuel, so like $1,500 or something to fill up the tank of fuel for the guy, right? But when Dan went back to the boat, because he hadn't said what he was doing, Jeremy, the guy who he was with, said, 'Dan, did you just fill up the boat? Did you just fill up the tank?' And Dan was like, 'Well, yeah, I did.' He said, 'Well, I was wondering where you'd gone.' He said, 'Well, thank you. You didn't need to do that.' And he said, Dan said, 'I didn't need to, no. But I enjoyed this so much. Like $1,500, it's like I couldn't have, if I paid 10 times
I couldn't have bought that if I tried.'
Yeah. And do you know what happened? The guy who owned the yacht, who's this brilliant business mind, said, 'Come and sit down with me for a bit.' So it's just Dan and this guy on the boat, 3 hours, going through Dan's business plan and his future. And this guy's invested now in multiple, of Dan's businesses that he set up. They spend lots of time together. Their families do together now on the boat and all these sorts of things, just because without thinking, he went and paid for it. So this is like step number 5. It's called the silver platter, because best will in the world, being nice and all of the things which I've said go so far. Sometimes though, you need to add a bit of like rocket fuel into that as well. So I call it the silver platter, but effectively it's things like, sometimes it's like pay to play. don't be afraid to get your wallet out and invest in somebody's membership, or fill up their boat with fuel, or, take somebody out on a trip if you really, hopefully if they say yes to it, if it's something which they like, or give somebody a gift, like a physical gift, which is meaningful to them, not expensive, but meaningful. That's more important. Or could you refer somebody a client so they do win financially from it? Could you introduce two people that end up doing business or a partnership together, so that, I've introduced now podcasters, with 2 million subscribers and 2 million subscribers together to do a partnership, and it's huge for them. And of
And
course,
that's a brilliant point too about introducing people. I sometimes complain. I wish more people would introduce me to other things, because I love the discovery aspect of when somebody says you should talk to so and so. It happens sometimes, but I do that a lot, and because I have hundreds of people that I've talked to. I'd be reading a book, or there is somebody who actually. I think they sent me an EPUB, like gifted me an Amazon EPUB to go read a book. And then I ordered the hard copy after it's just like this, when these ideas. So what I'm saying to people listening, when I first heard Robin talk about, let's charter a yacht. I mean, okay, I can abstract the lesson from a really amazing example in Dubai. But then when I started to think about, it's like, this stuff happens to me all the time. I'm doing something. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm reading a book. I'm talking to someone, and somebody else pops into my head. I'm the person who goes and sends the email or tells the other person, hey, I think you should. I connect those things a lot. So I'm thinking maybe that's the piece that people really don't, that maybe that takes a little more chutzpah than the average person has. I don't know. I don't know why I use that word. Anyway. But so first of all, give me the 5 steps again. So people,
Sure.
so to help me dig them out for the show notes, but give me the 5 steps again, enumerated.
Well, you can't remember it from the last 36 minutes worth of conversation.
I actually kind of can, but I want to repeat it for everybody else.
So step number 1, be intentional. Write down that list of 10 people or brands that you would love to partner up with, because they're fun to be around. Step number 2 is then make sure that you put yourself in the same room and in the front row so you can actually physically start to interact with these people, because meeting somebody in person is probably the equivalent to 1,000 cold DMs or emails if you can actually get in front of them.
Yeah, if that.
That's it. Step number 3, be helpful and add value, and with no expectation of anything in return, and be patient with it. It's going to take time for whatever's going to happen and come back to you. Step number 4 is find your inside man or woman. And that's purely because sometimes the person you're looking up to and want to build a partnership with is just too busy. So spend time getting to know their team. And then when they do their Monday morning stand-up meeting, your name will naturally come into conversation because you've done something helpful for them. And then step number 5 is that silver platter. Pay to play, or make introductions, or just gift people things to kind of reciprocate and help their brand, because that energy will come back to you eventually as well.
Terrific. I want to get to the one last thing, but I'm just going to say that was super awesome. I think this is a little more, I like this. This is a little more nuts and boltsy. There's homework. People can write down their notes. They can go think about, they can imagine near doing that. A little more nuts and boltsy than some of the ones I've gotten to do. So I really enjoy, I'm hoping that people will flame me or respond or tell me how great it was. So please try it. So I want to say thanks so much. I know you have one more thing you want to share. So tell me about the book, and what else have I missed?
Yeah. So, 2 things actually. So firstly, a lot of what I talk about and share, I'm trying to build my YouTube channel at the moment as well. So it'd be wonderful if you're able to share a link to that. Just, I try and do a couple of videos a month, just sort of high level, talking about these sorts of ideas. Mostly they're practical things which I've implemented and done in my business, which has kind of created results. But second thing, more importantly, I do have a gift. It'd be really awful if I came onto this podcast, right, and then wasn't generous off the back of it.
I wasn't even thinking that, but I'm thinking that, what are you bringing?
So, but I've got a pile of physical copies of my book, Take Your Shot, which I'm happy to sign and send out, ship them anywhere in the world to wherever your listeners are. Just as a little gift to kind of give back. And I think in a world where a lot of stuff is done digitally these days, you can't beat having something physical and tangible in your hands to kind of sit and have a nice cup of coffee of a sunny morning and read, thumb through a book. So the address for that is fearless.biz/TYS for Take Your Shot. Optional postage is entirely optional. If you put your address in, I'll still send it wherever you are in the world. I think the most random place I've sent one so far is Mongolia. So if you can beat that, even better, bonus points.
That's pretty random. Okay. Yeah. And I'll put the link in the show notes. People don't have to back up and figure out the URL. Just scroll down. It's in there. Terrific. All right. Well, thanks so much, Robin, for taking the time. It was everything I thought it would be. And I look forward to seeing when next our paths cross.
Awesome. Thank you, Craig.